The galaxy was vast, filled with stars that twinkled like diamonds scattered across an endless black canvas. For centuries, the Vorthak Empire had stretched its claws into every corner of this immense universe. Their ships were sleek and dark, gliding silently through space like predators hunting for prey. They had conquered countless planets, wiping out civilizations that dared to resist them. The Vorthak were merciless, their weapons advanced beyond imagination, and their armies unstoppable. Wherever they went, fear followed, but there was one planet that refused to fall: Earth. Earth was different from the other worlds the Vorthak had encountered. It wasn't covered in towering cities made of crystal or floating structures held aloft by anti-gravity technology. Instead, it was a chaotic mix of green forests, sprawling oceans, and bustling cities filled with people who argued, laughed, and dreamed. To the Vorthak, Earth seemed primitive, almost laughable compared to the sophisticated societies they had crushed before. Yet despite its apparent weakness, Earth stood firm against them. Ethan Cole sat in a dimly lit room deep underground. Maps and holographic projections floated around him, showing troop movements, supply lines, and enemy positions. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with determination. Ethan was no soldier by training. He was a strategist, someone who understood patterns and probabilities better than most. Before the Vorthak arrived, he had been just another nameless analyst working for the government. Now, he was leading humanity's last stand. Another wave is coming, said Laura Bennett, a scientist who had joined the resistance effort. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the settings on her tablet. Their ships are gathering at the edge of our atmosphere. Ethan nodded without looking up. He already knew. The Vorthak always attacked in waves, testing Earth's defenses until they found a crack to exploit. So far, humanity had managed to hold them off, but each battle left them weaker. Supplies were running low, and morale was starting to waver. Still, Ethan refused to give up. Every time the Vorthak came, humans fought back harder, smarter, and more fiercely than anyone thought possible. Outside, the sky was dark, not because of nightfall, but because of the massive alien fleet hovering above the planet. Their ships blocked out the sun, casting long shadows over the land below. People called them the Harbingers, ominous shapes that promised destruction. But even under those shadows, life continued. Farmers still tended their fields, teachers still taught their students, and families still gathered around dinner tables. Humanity had survived wars, plagues, and natural disasters throughout history. This invasion would be no different. Captain Rachel Monroe paced the bridge of her flagship, staring down at the blue and green orb below. She was tall and commanding, with sharp features that matched her no-nonsense demeanor. As one of the highest-ranking officers in the Vorthak fleet, she had led countless successful campaigns. Planets fell before her like dominoes, their leaders bowing in submission within days or hours of her arrival. But Earth was different. "They're still holding out," muttered Commander Larson, standing beside her. His tone carried a hint of disbelief. "We've hit them with everything we've got, and they keep fighting back." Rachel didn't respond immediately. She had noticed something strange about Earth from the beginning. Most planets surrendered quickly once. They realized the futility of resisting the Vorthak. Others tried to fight but collapsed when faced with superior firepower. Earth should have fallen weeks ago. Instead, its defenders adapted, using unconventional tactics and sheer grit to repel attack after attack. It puzzled her and intrigued her. "What do you think makes them so stubborn?" Larson asked, breaking the silence. Rachel turned to look at him. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I intend to find out." She walked over to a console and pulled up footage of recent battles. On the screen, human soldiers could be seen, retreating into dense forests, setting traps and ambushing Vorthak patrols. Civilians helped too, hiding wounded fighters, sabotaging supply lines, and spreading misinformation. There was a sense of unity among them, a shared purpose that seemed almost inspiring. Rachel shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought. The Vorthak did not conquer planets to admire their inhabitants. They conquered because it was their destiny, their right. And yet, as she watched the humans scramble to defend their home, she couldn't help but wonder what drove them. What made these fragile creatures refuse to kneel? Back on Earth, Ethan received reports of another victory, a small one, but significant nonetheless. A group of guerrilla fighters had destroyed a Vorthak landing craft, delaying the next wave of attacks. Cheers erupted in the command center, but Ethan remained focused. He knew better than to celebrate too soon. The Vorthak always regrouped, always returned stronger. "We can't keep doing this forever," Laura said quietly, standing beside him. "Sooner or later they'll overwhelm us." Ethan sighed. "Then we'll make sure later is as far away as possible." Laura gave him a small smile. "You really believe we can win, don't you?" "I have to," Ethan replied. "If I stop believing, then what's the point?" As the days passed, the tension grew thicker. The Vorthak fleet loomed larger in the sky, their presence a constant reminder of the threat hanging over humanity. News outlets broadcast messages of hope, urging people to stay strong. Leaders gave speeches calling for unity and resilience. And in homes across the globe, parents hugged their children a little tighter, knowing that tomorrow might never come. But amid the fear and uncertainty, there was also defiance. Humans had always been survivors, adapting to whatever challenges the universe threw at them. Whether it was building shelters during ice ages or sending rockets to the moon, they had proven time and again that they could overcome anything. The Vorthak might have technology, size, and numbers on their side, but Earth had something else: heart. Rachel continued to study Earth, poring over data and analyzing strategies. She began to see patterns in the way humans fought. They relied on teamwork, creativity, and sheer willpower. Unlike other species, they didn't follow rigid protocols or predictable routines. Each battle was unique, shaped by the terrain, the weather, and the personalities of those involved. It was messy, chaotic, and unpredictable, but effective. And then there was Ethan Cole. Rachel had identified him as the mastermind behind Earth's resistance. His name appeared in intercepted communications, his face in surveillance footage. At first, she dismissed him as just another leader, someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time. But the more she learned about him, the more she realized he was extraordinary. He inspired loyalty, rallied the broken, and turned despair into determination. In a way, he reminded her of herself, or at least the person she used to be before duty consumed her. One evening, as Rachel stood alone on the observation deck of her flagship, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. Below her, Earth shone brightly, its surface alive with activity. Lights flickered in cities, fires burned in forests, and oceans sparkled under the moonlight. Despite everything, it was beautiful. For the first time in years, Rachel felt doubt creep into her mind. Was this truly the right path? Was conquest worth the cost? She pushed the thoughts aside, reminding herself of her mission. The Vorthak. Empire depended on her success. Failure was not an option, but deep down she wondered if Earth's refusal to surrender wasn't just an act of defiance. It was a message that perhaps, just perhaps, there was another way. The resistance on Earth was holding together, but barely. The constant attacks from the Vorthak had left cities in ruins and resources dwindling. People were tired of running, tired of fighting, and tired of living under the shadow of an alien fleet that seemed determined to crush them. Ethan Cole felt the weight of it all pressing down on him. He spent most of his days in the underground command center, surrounded by maps, reports, and hollow screens displaying updates from the front lines. His mind was always racing, trying to stay one step ahead of the enemy. Ethan wasn't alone in his efforts. Laura Bennett worked tirelessly beside him, her sharp intellect and calm demeanor making her an invaluable ally. She had been studying fragments of Vorthak technology recovered from previous battles, hoping to find a weakness they could exploit. Her lab was cluttered with wires, circuits, and half-dismantled gadgets, but she moved through it all with precision, her hands steady even when her voice betrayed her fatigue. "We need more time," Laura said one evening as she leaned over a glowing piece of alien machinery. If I can figure out how their communication systems work, we might be able to disrupt their coordination during battles. Ethan nodded, though he didn't look hopeful. Time was the one thing they didn't have. The Vorthak were relentless, and each new wave of attacks pushed humanity closer to collapse. Still, he trusted Laura's instincts. If anyone could crack the secrets of Vorthak tech, it was her. Meanwhile, tensions were rising among Earth's leaders. Not everyone agreed with Ethan's approach. Some argued that surrender was the only way to save what was left of humanity. They believed that bowing to the Vorthak would spare them from total annihilation. Others insisted on launching a full-scale counterattack, despite the obvious risks. Ethan listened to their arguments, his jaw tightening with frustration. He knew that division was exactly what the Vorthak wanted. If humanity turned against itself, the invaders wouldn't even need to fight. "We're stronger together," Ethan said during one heated meeting. "If we fall apart now, we've already lost." His words silenced the room, but not everyone was convinced. Ethan couldn't blame them. Fear had a way of clouding judgment, and hope was becoming harder to hold on to. Still, he refused to give. As long as there was breath in his body, he would fight for Earth, and for the people who still believed they could win. High above the planet, Captain Rachel Monroe wrestled with her own doubts. She had received orders from the Vorthak Emperor. Earth must fall no matter the cost. Yet as she studied the humans' tactics, she found herself questioning the morality of her mission. Why were they so different from other species? Why did they refuse to surrender, even when faced with overwhelming odds? Rachel began spending more time in the observation deck of her flagship, watching Earth spin slowly below her. Its surface was scarred by war, yet it remained vibrant and alive. Forests stretched across continents, oceans shimmered under sunlight, and cities glowed like constellations at night. There was a beauty to it that Rachel couldn't ignore, a beauty matched only by the resilience of its inhabitants. One day, while reviewing footage of recent battles, Rachel noticed something remarkable. Humans didn't just rely on brute force. They used creativity, adaptability, and teamwork. In one skirmish, a group of farmers had used tractors to block a Vorthak patrol, buying enough time for nearby soldiers to launch a surprise attack. In another, children had helped dig trenches to protect wounded fighters. It was chaos, yes, but it was effective chaos. Rachel realized that Earth's strength lay not in its weapons or technology, but in its people. They fought not because they were ordered to, but because they believed in something greater than themselves. Freedom, home, family. These were concepts the Vorthak had long abandoned in their quest for domination. Her thoughts drifted to Ethan Cole. From intercepted communications, Rachel had pieced together a picture of the man leading Earth's resistance. He was resourceful, determined, and inspiring, qualities she hadn't seen in an opponent before. She wondered what it would be like to meet him face to face, to understand what drove him to keep fighting when all seemed lost. But such thoughts were dangerous. The Vorthak did not negotiate with enemies, nor did they show mercy. Rachel reminded herself of this every time doubt crept into her mind. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that Earth's defiance held a lesson, one she desperately needed to learn. Back on Earth, Ethan and his team prepared for the next wave of attacks. Intelligence reports indicated that the Vorthak were amassing their largest fleet yet. If they broke through Earth's defenses, it would mean the end of humanity. Ethan knew they had to act fast. "Laura, how close are you to cracking their comms?" Ethan asked as he entered her lab. "I'm close," Laura replied without looking up. Her fingers danced over a keyboard, lines of code scrolling across a screen. "But I need more data. If we can capture one of their signal relays intact, I might be able to reverse engineer it." Ethan frowned. Capturing a Vorthak relay would be nearly impossible, but they didn't have any other options. "We'll make it happen," he said, firmly. That night, Ethan called together his top advisors to discuss the plan. They would launch a daring raid on a Vorthak outpost located near the outskirts of Earth's atmosphere. The goal was simple: infiltrate the base, secure the relay, and escape before the enemy could respond. It was risky, but if they succeeded, it could turn the tide of the war. As the team finalized their strategy, Ethan allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He thought about the people counting on him, the families hiding in bunkers, the soldiers risking their lives on the front lines, the children dreaming of a future free from fear. He owed it to them to keep fighting, no matter how bleak things seemed. Far above, Rachel paced the bridge of her flagship, her mind heavy with conflicting emotions. She had received intelligence about the upcoming raid on the outpost and knew it was her duty to stop it, but part of her hoped the humans would succeed. Perhaps, just perhaps, their victory would prove that resistance was not futile, that even the smallest spark of hope could ignite change. When the raid began, chaos erupted. Human fighters launched a surprise assault on the Vorthak outpost, catching the guards off guard. Explosions lit up the darkness of space as ships clashed and lasers streaked across the void. Inside the base, Ethan led a small team through narrow corridors, dodging patrols and disabling security systems. Every second counted. Finally, they reached the relay. Laura's instructions echoed in Ethan's earpiece as he worked to detach the device from its mount. Sweat dripped down his face and his heart pounded in his chest. Behind him, gunfire echoed as his teammates held off waves of Vorthak reinforcements. "Got it," Ethan shouted, clutching the relay tightly. "Let's move!" They sprinted back toward their ship, narrowly avoiding capture. As they lifted off, the outpost exploded behind them, a fiery beacon signaling their success. High above, Rachel watched, the scene unfold with mixed feelings. The humans had done the impossible once again. Against all odds, they had won. And for the first time in her life, Rachel felt a flicker of admiration for Earth, for its people, and for the man who inspired them all. The raid on the Vorthak outpost had been a success, but Ethan Cole knew it was only the beginning. The captured signal relay was their best chance to disrupt the invaders' communication systems, but it wasn't going to be easy. Laura Bennett worked around the clock in her lab, surrounded by tools and glowing screens. Her fingers flew over keyboards as she analyzed the alien device, trying to understand its inner workings. "This thing is more complicated than I thought," Laura muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration. "But if we can crack it, we might be able to jam their signals during battles." Ethan stood nearby, watching her work. He trusted Laura completely, but he couldn't help feeling impatient. Every second they spent studying the relay was another second the Vorthak could use to prepare for their next attack. Still, he forced himself to stay calm. Rushing would only lead to mistakes, and they couldn't afford those. "We'll figure it out," Ethan said firmly, though his voice carried a hint of uncertainty. "We always do." Laura glanced up at him and gave a small smile. "You're right. We've made it this far, haven't we?" Despite the small victory, tensions on Earth were growing worse. Supplies were running dangerously low, and the constant threat of invasion weighed heavily on everyone. Some cities had already fallen into chaos, with people looting stores and fighting over scraps of food. Ethan tried to reassure them through broadcasts, urging unity and resilience, but he knew words alone wouldn't solve the problem. They needed action, and fast. Meanwhile, Captain Rachel Monroe faced consequences for her hesitation during the raid. When her superiors discovered that she had delayed sending reinforcements to the outpost, they summoned her for questioning. Standing before the cold, unyielding faces of the Vorthak High Command, Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. "Explain yourself, Captain," one of the commanders demanded, his voice sharp and accusing. "Why did you wait so long to respond?" Rachel straightened her posture, her expression unreadable. "I believed the humans would retreat after the initial engagement," she lied smoothly. "It seemed unnecessary to waste resources until the situation became critical." Her explanation didn't fully satisfy the commanders, but they accepted it, for now. As she left the meeting, Rachel felt a mix of relief and guilt. She had avoided punishment, but she knew she couldn't keep hiding her growing doubts forever. Something inside her had shifted, and she wasn't sure she could go back to being the loyal soldier she once was. Back on Earth, Laura finally made a breakthrough. After days of relentless effort, She managed to decode part of the Vorthak communication system. Her eyes lit up with excitement as she called Ethan over to see her progress. "I think I can create a virus," Laura explained, pointing to a series of lines of code on her screen. "If we release it into their network, it could scramble their messages and leave them disorganized during battles." Ethan nodded, a spark of hope igniting within him. "That's exactly what we need. How soon can you deploy it?" "Not immediately," Laura admitted. "We'll need to test it first, and even then, there's no guarantee it will work perfectly. But it's our best shot." While Laura fine-tuned the virus, Ethan began planning how to use it. They decided to launch a large-scale ambush during the Vorthak's next attack, using the virus to disrupt their coordination mid-battle. It was a risky plan, but they had no other options. If it failed, humanity might not survive another assault. High, above Earth, Rachel continued to observe the planet below. She had started secretly recording transmissions from human broadcasts, fascinated by their messages of hope and defiance. One speech in particular caught her attention. Ethan Cole's voice echoed through her private quarters, filled with determination and conviction. "We may be outnumbered, but we are not defeated," Ethan said in the recording. "As long as we stand together, we will never fall." Rachel listened to the words over and over, feeling something stir deep within her. She had spent her entire life following orders without question, believing that conquest was the natural order of things. But Earth's resistance challenged everything she thought she knew. For the first time, she wondered if the Vorthak Empire's endless expansion was truly justified, or if it was simply a cycle of destruction disguised as destiny. Her musings were interrupted by an urgent message from the Emperor himself. The transmission appeared on her console, and Rachel braced herself as she activated it. The Emperor's face appeared stern and commanding. "Captain Monroe," he began, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Earth must fall within the week. Failure will not be tolerated." Rachel swallowed hard, but maintained her composure. "Understood, my lord." As the transmission ended, Rachel felt a surge of frustration. She had seen firsthand how resilient Earth was, how fiercely its people fought for their freedom. Destroying them would accomplish nothing except adding another scar to the galaxy's already battered history. Yet, disobeying the Emperor was unthinkable, or so she had always believed. On Earth, the final preparations for the ambush were underway. Ethan gathered his team in the command center, laying out the plan step by step. Everyone listened intently, knowing that this battle could decide the fate of humanity. "When the Vorthak fleet enters our atmosphere, we'll hit them hard and fast," Ethan explained, pointing to a map projected onto the wall. "At the same time, Laura will release the virus into their network. With any luck, it'll throw them into chaos, giving us the upper hand." The room buzzed with nervous energy, but there was also a sense of resolve. These men and women had endured unimaginable hardships, yet they still stood ready to fight for their home. Ethan looked around at their determined faces and felt a swell of pride. "Remember why we're doing this," he said, his voice steady and strong. "We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every person who calls Earth home. Let's make them proud." The day of the ambush arrived, and the skies above Earth darkened as the Vorthak fleet descended. Their ships glided silently through the atmosphere, casting ominous shadows over the land below. Ethan watched from his position in the command center, his heart pounding in anticipation. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. "Launch Phase 1, Ethan ordered, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Human fighters surged forward, engaging the Vorthak ships in a fiery clash. Explosions lit up the sky as lasers streaked across the heavens, painting the battlefield with bursts of light. Amid the chaos, Laura activated the virus, sending it hurtling into the enemy's communication network. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly but surely, the Vorthak forces began to falter. Ships veered off course, patrols lost cohesion, and commands went unanswered. "The virus was working, they're falling apart," someone shouted, their voice filled with disbelief. Ethan allowed himself a brief smile. "Keep pushing, don't let up." The humans pressed their advantage, striking hard and fast while the Vorthak struggled to regroup. It was a sight unlike anything Rachel had ever witnessed. From her flagship, she watched in awe as Earth's defenders turned the tide of the battle. Despite their inferior technology, they fought with a ferocity and unity that the Vorthak could not match. As the Vorthak fleet retreated, Rachel felt a pang of admiration and shame. She had spent her life serving an empire built on domination, but Earth's resistance showed her a different path, a path where strength came not from power or fear, but from courage and unity. For the first time in her career, Rachel questioned whether she was on the right side of the war. The victory was short-lived, but it gave humanity a glimmer of hope. The ambush had worked better than anyone expected. The virus Laura created had disrupted the Vorthak fleet's communication systems, leaving them disorganized and vulnerable. For the first time in months, Earth's skies were clear of enemy ships. People celebrated in the streets, cheering for their defenders and embracing one another with tears of relief. But Ethan Cole knew they couldn't afford to relax. The Vorthak hadn't been defeated. They had only retreated. It was only a matter of time before they regrouped and came back stronger. Still, the success of the ambush had given the resistance something precious. Time. Time to rest, time to regroup, and most importantly, time to plan their next move. In the command center, Ethan stood with his team, reviewing the aftermath of the battle. Maps and reports covered the walls, showing the damage inflicted on the Vorthak fleet. Laura sat at a console, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she analyzed data from the virus's impact. Her face was pale with exhaustion, but her eyes sparkled with determination. "We did it," she said softly, almost as if she couldn't believe it herself. "We actually did it." Ethan nodded, though his expression remained serious. "For now, yes. But this isn't over. The Vorthak will come back, and when they do, they'll be angrier than ever." Laura sighed and leaned back in her chair. "I know. I'm already working on ways to improve the virus. If we can refine it, maybe we can use it again, or even create something stronger." "Good," Ethan replied. "We need every advantage we can get." As the days passed, life on Earth began to stabilize slightly. Supplies were still scarce, but the brief respite allowed people to rebuild what they could. Farmers returned to their fields. Engineers worked to repair damaged infrastructure, and families tried to find moments of normalcy amidst the chaos. Ethan traveled across the planet, meeting with leaders and ordinary citizens alike. He wanted to remind them that they weren't alone, that everyone had a role to play in defending their home. But not everyone shared his optimism. Some leaders argued that the ambush had only delayed the inevitable. They believed that fighting the Vorthak was futile, and that humanity should focus on negotiating a surrender instead. Ethan listened to their arguments patiently, though his patience was wearing thin. "We've proven that we can fight back," he told them during one heated meeting. "If we give up now, everything we've sacrificed will have been for nothing." His words carried weight, but doubts lingered in the minds of many. The Vorthak were still out there, watching and waiting. No one knew when or how they would strike again. High above Earth, Captain Rachel Monroe wrestled with her own doubts. The ambush had shaken her faith in the Vorthak Empire more than she cared to admit. She had spent her entire career believing in the righteousness of their conquests. But Earth's defiance made her question everything. Why destroy a world so full of life and resilience? What purpose did it serve? Rachel spent hours studying recordings of human broadcasts, listening to speeches and messages from Earth's defenders. She was particularly drawn to Ethan Cole's words, which were filled with conviction and hope. His voice reminded her of a time when she too had believed in something greater than orders and duty. One evening, while standing on the observation deck of her flagship, Rachel made a decision. She activated a secure channel and sent a message to Earth. It was risky, borderline treasonous, but she felt she had no choice. Humanity deserved a chance to survive, and she could no longer stand by and watch them be destroyed. "This is Captain Rachel Monroe of the Vorthak fleet," she began. her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "I want to help. If you're willing to trust me, I can provide information that might save your planet." On Earth, Ethan received the message with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. He gathered his advisors to discuss it, knowing that trusting an enemy officer was a dangerous gamble. But Rachel's offer seemed genuine, and the information she promised could be invaluable. "She might be lying," one advisor warned. "This could be a trap." "I don't think so," Ethan replied after a moment of thought. "If she wanted to betray us, she wouldn't have contacted us directly. Besides, we're running out of options." Reluctantly, the team agreed to proceed cautiously. Ethan responded to Rachel's message, thanking her for reaching out and asking for proof of her sincerity. In return, Rachel sent detailed intel about the Vorthak fleet's movements, vulnerabilities, and upcoming plans. Her information confirmed what Ethan had suspected. The Vorthak were preparing for a massive assault, larger and more devastating than anything Earth had faced before. With Rachel's help, Ethan and his team began devising a new strategy. They decided to launch a series of smaller, coordinated attacks on key Vorthak installations, weakening their forces before the main invasion. Laura worked tirelessly to enhance the virus, hoping to make it even more effective against the invaders' systems. Meanwhile, Rachel faced growing scrutiny from her superiors. Her delayed response during the ambush had already raised suspicions, and her recent behavior, spending long hours alone in her quarters and avoiding certain meetings, only added to their concerns. "Is there something you're not telling us, Captain?" Commander Larson asked one day, his tone sharp and probing. Rachel met his gaze without flinching. "No, sir. I'm simply focused on ensuring our next attack succeeds." Larson studied her for a moment, then nodded. "See that? It does. The Emperor expects results." As soon as he left, Rachel exhaled deeply, her hands trembling slightly. She knew she was walking a dangerous line, but she couldn't turn back now. Earth had shown her a different way, a way where courage and unity mattered more than blind obedience. She had chosen her side, and she would stand by it no matter the cost. Back on Earth, preparations for the counterattacks were underway. Ethan divided his forces into small teams, each tasked with targeting a specific Vorthak outpost or supply line. The goal was to weaken the invaders' infrastructure, making it harder for them to launch a full-scale assault. "You all know the risks," Ethan said during a briefing. "These missions won't be easy, and some of you may not come back. But if we succeed, we'll buy ourselves the time we need to prepare for the final battle." The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Finally, one soldier spoke up. "We're ready, sir, whatever it takes." Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with pride. These men and women were willing to risk everything for their home, and he couldn't ask for more. As the teams deployed, Rachel monitored their progress from her flagship. She provided real-time updates and guidance, helping them avoid detection and strike with precision. Her assistance proved invaluable, turning potential disasters into victories. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was making a difference, not just following orders but truly contributing to something meaningful. But her actions did not go unnoticed. One of her subordinates grew suspicious of her frequent communications and unauthorized decisions. When he reported his findings to the High Command, Rachel was summoned for questioning once again. "Explain yourself, Captain," the lead interrogator demanded, his voice cold and unforgiving. Rachel took a deep breath, knowing she had reached a crossroads. She could deny everything and try to protect herself, or she could admit the truth and face the consequences. "I've been helping Earth," she said finally, her voice calm but resolute, "because I believe they deserve a chance to survive." The room fell silent, the weight of her confession hanging in the air. For a moment, Rachel wondered if she had made a mistake. But then she remembered the faces of the humans she had seen in the broadcasts, their determination, their hope, their refusal to give up. She had chosen her path, and she would walk it proudly. Rachel Monroe's confession sent shockwaves through the Vorthak High Command. Her betrayal was not taken lightly, and within hours she was arrested and sentenced to execution. The decision was swift and merciless, as was expected from the Vorthak Empire. Rachel had known the risks when she chose to help Earth, but now that her fate was sealed, she felt a strange sense of peace. She had done what she believed was right, even if it cost her everything. But Ethan Cole wasn't about to let Rachel's sacrifice be in vain. When news of her arrest reached Earth, he immediately called an emergency meeting with his team. Laura Bennett, who had been monitoring communications, looked pale as she relayed the details. "They're going to execute her," Laura said, her voice trembling. "If we don't do something, all the intel she gave us will have been for nothing." Ethan clenched his fists, anger and guilt swirling inside him. He had trusted Rachel, and now she was paying the price for helping them. He couldn't let that stand. "We're getting her out," Ethan declared, his tone leaving no room for argument. "She risked everything for us. We owe her this." The room erupted in protests. Some argued that rescuing Rachel would be suicidal, while others pointed out that they didn't have the resources for such a risky mission, but Ethan silenced them with a sharp look. "I'm not asking for opinions," he said firmly. "We're doing this because it's the right thing to do, and because without her, we might not survive the next attack." Reluctantly, the team agreed to proceed. They knew Ethan was right. Rachel's knowledge of the Vorthak fleet could still turn the tide of the war. If they could save her, they would gain not just an ally, but a symbol of hope. A Vorthak officer turning against her own empire proved that even the strongest systems could crumble from within. The plan was simple, yet dangerous. A small team of Earth's best fighters would infiltrate Rachel's flagship, locate her cell, and extract her before the execution order could be carried out. It would require precision, speed, and a lot of luck. Ethan insisted on leading the mission himself, despite objections from his advisors. "This isn't up for debate," Ethan said when Laura tried to argue. "I'm going." End of discussion. As the team prepared for the mission, Rachel sat alone in her cell aboard the Vorthak flagship. The walls were cold and gray, and the air smelled metallic and stale. She had accepted her fate, but she couldn't stop thinking about Earth, the planet she had come to admire so deeply. She wondered if her actions had made a difference, if humanity would find a way to survive long enough to rebuild their world. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching her cell. The door slid open, revealing two Vorthak, soldiers armed with weapons. Rachel stood slowly, expecting them to escort her to her execution. Instead, one of them tossed her a set of restraints. "You're being moved," the soldier said gruffly. "Orders from above." Rachel frowned but didn't argue. She allowed herself to be led down a series of corridors until they reached a cargo bay. Inside, a small transport shuttle waited, its engines humming softly. Before she could process what was happening, the soldiers shoved her inside and locked the door behind her. Moments later, the shuttle detached from the flagship and sped away into space. Rachel gripped the edge of her seat, confused and wary. Something wasn't right. Why hadn't they executed her? Where were they taking her? Her questions were answered when the shuttle landed on a remote asteroid base and the hatch opened. Standing there, weapons drawn, were Ethan Cole and his team. "Captain Monroe," Ethan said, stepping forward, "we're here to get you out." Rachel stared at him, disbelief written across her face. "You came for me?" "We don't leave our allies behind," Ethan replied simply. "Now let's move. We've got a war to finish." The rescue mission was far from smooth. As the team escorted Rachel back to their ship, alarms blared throughout the base. Vorthak reinforcements arrived quickly, forcing Ethan and his team to fight their way out. Lasers streaked through the air, explosions rocked the ground, and chaos reigned. Despite the odds, the humans held their ground, their determination unmatched. During the escape, Rachel found herself fighting alongside Ethan and his team. For the first time in years, she felt alive, not as a soldier following orders, but as someone fighting for something she truly believed in. Together, they managed to reach their ship and blast off into space, leaving the asteroid base in flames behind them. Back on Earth, Rachel was greeted with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Many people struggled to trust a former Vorthak officer, no matter how noble her actions had been. But Ethan stood firmly by her side, vouching for her loyalty and emphasizing the importance of her knowledge. She saved us, Ethan told a group of skeptical leaders, and now she's one of us. If we want to win this war, we need to work together no matter where we come from. Slowly but surely, Rachel earned their trust. She spent hours in meetings with Ethan and Laura, sharing critical information about the Vorthak fleet's weaknesses and strategies. Her insights allowed the resistance to refine their plans further, targeting key installations and supply lines with surgical precision. But Rachel's presence also sparked unrest among the Vorthak ranks. News of her defection spread quickly, sowing doubt and dissent among the soldiers. Some began questioning the morality of their mission, wondering if conquering Earth was truly worth the cost. Others grew frustrated with their commander's inability to crush the human resistance. The cracks in the Empire's foundation were widening, and Rachel's actions had become a catalyst for change. As tensions mounted, the Vorthak Emperor issued a new directive: destroy Earth at all costs. The message was clear: failure would no longer be tolerated. Massive fleets gathered in orbit, preparing for a final, devastating assault. Humanity braced itself for the battle of its lifetime. Ethan addressed the people of Earth one last time, his voice filled with resolve. "This is it," he said, standing before a crowd of soldiers and civilians alike. "The fight ahead won't be easy, but we've faced impossible odds before, and we've won. Together we'll show the Vorthak that Earth is not theirs to take. Together we'll protect our home." His words ignited a fire in everyone who heard them. Men and women volunteered for the front lines, children helped gather supplies, and families prayed for victory. Earth was united in a way it had never been before, bound by a shared purpose and unwavering hope. On the eve of the final battle, Rachel approached Ethan privately. They stood on a hill overlooking the city below, the lights flickering like stars against the night sky. "Thank you," Rachel said quietly, "for saving me and for giving me a reason to keep fighting." Ethan smiled faintly. "You saved us first. Without you, we wouldn't have made it this far." Rachel paused, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Do you think we can win?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I have to believe we can. If I stop believing, then what's the point?" Rachel smiled, a flicker of hope lighting up her eyes. "Then let's make sure we do." The next morning, the skies above Earth darkened as the Vorthak fleet descended once more. This time, however, humanity was ready. Armed with Rachel's intel, Laura's enhanced virus, and Ethan's leadership, they launched a fierce counteroffensive. Ships clashed in fiery dogfights. Lasers illuminated the atmosphere, and the ground shook with explosions. In the midst of the chaos, Rachel made a choice. Knowing that her presence posed too great a risk to the humans, she volunteered to return to the Vorthak flagship and plant a device that would disable their entire fleet. It was a suicide mission, but she insisted it was the only way to ensure Earth's survival. "You don't have to do this," Ethan said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Yes, I do," Rachel replied, her expression resolute. "It's my chance to make things right. For Earth, for you, and for myself." With tears in his eyes, Ethan nodded. "Then go with our thanks and our respect." Rachel saluted him one final time before boarding a stolen Vorthak fighter. As she soared toward the flagship, she activated the device, knowing it would overload the ship's core and cripple the fleet. Moments later, the flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, sending shockwaves through space. The sight stunned both sides. The Vorthak forces faltered, their coordination shattered without their central command. Seizing the opportunity, humanity pressed forward, driving the invaders back until the last ship retreated into the void. When the dust settled, Earth stood victorious. The Vorthak had been defeated, their empire fractured beyond repair. And though Rachel Monroe was gone, her sacrifice became a symbol of unity and courage, a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope could prevail. The war was over, but the scars it left behind ran deep. Earth's cities were battered, its landscapes scarred by battles that had raged across the planet. Smoke still rose from ruins where homes and businesses once stood, and the air carried the faint smell of ash and metal. Yet amidst the destruction, There was a sense of triumph, a quiet pride that humanity had survived against all odds. Ethan Cole walked through what remained of the command center, his boots crunching on broken glass and debris. The room was empty now, its screens dark and consoles silent. For months, this place had been the heart of humanity's resistance, buzzing with activity and tension. Now it felt hollow, like a relic of a time no one wanted to forget but everyone hoped never to repeat. He stopped in front of a cracked screen that still displayed a map of Earth. Lines marked battle zones, supply routes, and enemy positions, all remnants of a fight that had tested humanity to its limits. Ethan traced one of those lines with his finger, remembering the sacrifices made along the way. So many lives had been lost, so many dreams cut short. But their efforts hadn't been in vain. They had won, not just for themselves, but for every person who called Earth home. Laura Bennett found him standing there, lost in thought. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it." Ethan nodded, though his expression remained somber. "Yeah, we did. But at what cost?" Laura didn't have an answer. Instead, she looked around the ruined command center, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and relief. "It's over now. That's what matters." Ethan forced a smile. "You're right. And thanks to you and Rachel, we had a fighting chance." The mention of Rachel's name brought a pang of sadness. Her sacrifice had turned the tide of the final battle, crippling the Vorthak fleet and giving humanity the upper hand they needed to drive the invaders away. Though she was gone, her bravery lived on in the stories people told. She had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even someone born into darkness could choose to stand in the light. In the days that followed, Earth began the long process of healing. Survivors worked together to rebuild what had been destroyed. Farmers planted new crops in fields littered with wreckage. Engineers repaired roads and bridges, and families salvaged whatever they could from the rubble of their homes. It was slow, grueling work, but no one complained. They had fought too hard to give up now. Ethan traveled across the globe, meeting with leaders and ordinary citizens alike. He listened to their stories, shared their grief, and offered words of encouragement. Wherever he went, people thanked him for his leadership, crediting him with saving humanity. But Ethan shook off their praise, insisting that the victory belonged to everyone. "I didn't do this alone," he told a crowd gathered in a makeshift town square. "Every single one of you played a part. You fought, you sacrificed, and you never gave up. That's why we're still here today." His words resonated, deeply inspiring people to keep moving forward despite the hardships ahead. Slowly but surely, life began to return to normal, or at least as close to normal as it could be after such a devastating conflict. High above Earth, the remnants of the Vorthak fleet retreated into the depths of space. Their emperor, humiliated by the failure to conquer Earth, ordered a full withdrawal. For the first time in centuries, the Vorthak Empire faced dissent from within its own ranks. Soldiers questioned their mission, officers argued over strategy, and entire colonies began resisting imperial control. The cracks Rachel had helped create continued to widen, threatening to tear the empire apart. On Earth, news of the Vorthak retreat brought a mix of relief and disbelief. People celebrated in the streets, lighting fireworks and singing songs of freedom. But beneath the joy lay a lingering fear. What if the Vorthak returned? What if another alien race decided to target Earth next? These questions weighed heavily on Ethan and his team, who knew that humanity couldn't afford to let its guard down. To prepare for the future, Ethan proposed forming a global defense network. Using technology recovered from the Vorthak and insights gained during the war, humanity would build weapons, ships, and communication systems capable of protecting Earth from any threat. Laura spearheaded the project, working tirelessly to reverse engineer alien tech and adapt it for human use. Her lab became a hub of innovation, filled with scientists, engineers, and volunteers eager to contribute. "It's not just about defense," Laura explained to Ethan one evening as they reviewed blueprints for a prototype fighter ship. "It's about showing the galaxy that Earth isn't weak. We're survivors. If anyone comes looking for trouble, we'll be ready. Ethan smiled, feeling a flicker of optimism for the first time in months. You're right. Maybe someday we'll even reach out to other planets, help them stand up to oppressors like the Vorthak. The idea stayed with him as he reflected on everything that had happened. Humanity had proven itself stronger than anyone expected, including the Vorthak. They had adapted, united, and persevered when all seemed lost. Perhaps it was time to share that strength with others, to show that even in the vastness of space, no one had to face tyranny alone. As weeks turned into months, Earth began reaching out to the stars. Messages of peace and solidarity were broadcast into the galaxy, inviting oppressed worlds to join forces with humanity. At first, there was silence. Then slowly, responses trickled in, cautious at first, then hopeful. Civilizations that had suffered under the Vorthak's rule saw Earth as a beacon of hope, proof that resistance wasn't futile. One day, Ethan received a transmission from a distant planet. Its leaders expressed gratitude for Earth's message and asked for guidance in overthrowing their Vorthak overlords. Ethan read the message several times, his heart swelling with pride. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, becoming a force for good in a galaxy plagued by fear and oppression. Later that evening, Ethan stood outside under a clear night sky. Stars twinkled above him, each one a reminder of how far humanity had come. He thought about Rachel and the sacrifices she had made, about Laura and her tireless efforts, and about the countless others who had fought to protect their home. Together, they had achieved the impossible. "Thank you," Ethan whispered, his voice carried away by the wind. "All of you. Earth wasn't perfect, it might never be, but it was free, united, and determined to shape its own destiny. In a universe full of uncertainty, that was enough."